Hey there my lovelies, and welcome to my BookTube channel, The Sassy Library Fox. My name is V, and today we're going to talk about, well, not disappointing books. I don't like that kind of expression. Let's just say the books that weren't my cup of tea. Yeah, let's go with this. I do this every year, and people that have followed my channel closely know that I don't like to use negative words. So let's just say I will talk about the books that weren't my kind of cup of tea, that weren't really what I was looking for. Yeah, we can talk around it as much as we like, but well, you better buckle up and take a seat, because today I'm going to serve you hot tea. Yeah. Okay. So let's not sugarcoat things and talk about why those books ended on the "those books just weren't for me" list. Okay, I'm gonna take a sip of my coffee. Feel free to take a sip of your hot tea. And let's do this. So I decided to go from the lowest rating up to the highest rating. Quite honestly, none of them got 1 pause, so the worst rating was 2 pause, and the best rating that landed on this list is 4 pause, which is actually a pretty good rating. But I had such a great reading year last year, so there weren't a lot of books that weren't my cup of tea. And I really had to think long and hard about which kind of books I wanted to put on that list. And well, those 5 managed to do that. And the first book I rated only 2 paws was Idle Burning by Usami. And I think the really low rating is due to the fact that I went into this book with a totally different expectation than what it actually was about. I thought I would go into this book exploring the toxic side of fandoms, and how when fans are obsessed with an idol, start to spiral and it kind of gets toxic. Yeah, you know what I mean. I thought I would read about the Say song, if you know the term. Those are the stalkerish fans of idols. So that was the expectation I had when I went into that book. What I actually got was a teenage girl that is obsessed with her idol, and there's a scandal around that idol. And he gets, well, hate comments, and he's in the media because of it. And we always see everything through the main character's eyes. And I think it's kind of hard to describe why this book didn't hit the nail on the head for me. But, well, we have Akari, and Akari is the fan. And the idol is named Masaki. And she's one of those fans that has a blog, writes about her favorite band and her bias. And she's a typical fan, I might say, until she's not. So what I expected the book to deliver was a glimpse at how fandom can become toxic if you are too obsessed with your idol. But what I actually got was a teenage girl that had a lot of mental health problems already before she became a fan. And being a fan actually helped her to cope with all her problems. So, yeah, I don't know. For me personally, the book didn't deliver what I wanted to read about. I wanted to read about a fan who spirals through the fandom and the relationship to their idol gets toxic. What I read about was a teenage girl at that, who was a pretty normal fan, and had mental health issues and problems that were never diagnosed and then kind of spiraled because of them. And I think the thing with the idol just added a little bit to it and made it worse later on. But the reasons for her spiraling were not diagnosed mental illnesses. I'm doing a really bad job at explaining why this book didn't work for me. But yeah, let's just say I went into it with a completely different expectation. I'm pretty certain a lot of people will like this book and will take something from this book. But for me it just didn't work because it didn't deliver what I expected it to. Yeah, let's keep it that way and continue to the next book before I start to talk in circles. The second book that landed on this list is Detransition Baby by Torrey Peters, and it got 3 paws from me. I already went into this book with the knowledge that it was a controversial book and that not everybody liked it. It's basically about 2 women, 2 trans women. One of them is Amy and the other one is Reese. And Amy and Reese are in a very well-functioning relationship, but then they break up. And years later, Amy detransitioned into Ames again and has an affair with his boss. And Katrina gets pregnant because Ames thought that he wouldn't be able to, to get a woman pregnant because he was on estrogen for a very long time. And yeah, he shouldn't have been able to create a child. Let's put it that way. So now his boss, Katrina, is pregnant and Ames remembers his relationship with Reese and how close they were to becoming parents. But then something happened which caused them to break up and yeah, the relationship just ended. So he gets in contact with Reese again and tells her that they could raise the child together as 3 parents. Yeah, it sounds as weird as it is to read. I was very thankful when Ames kind of admitted in the book that this was a very weird idea. But yeah, that is the premise of the book. What we get in here is a lot insight into the life of trans women. It's very interesting to see which kind of problems and obstacles they have to deal with. I really like that. I liked feminism that shone through the book sometimes, but there were also, in the form of a character, in the form of Reese, there were a lot of things that made me really uncomfortable and that totally, I don't know, Reese kind of has that voice in her head that tells her that she needs to be in a relationship with an abusive man because then she can feel weak like a woman. And quite honestly, I really didn't like that. The way Reese thought about certain things, I couldn't. I honestly hope that not every trans woman thinks like that and that the majority of them wants to have healthy and nice relationships. So yeah, there were a lot of things about Reese that just rubbed me the wrong way, and yeah, the stance on things and certain themes of Reese weren't my cup of tea, and I disagreed immensely. So that was the controversial part of the book. I think the way it was told, the writing style, wasn't my kind of thing as well. I had a really hard time to get into the book and to pick it up again because the writing style just wasn't for me. So yeah, there were a couple of things that didn't work for me, which caused me to rate this with 3 paws. Not everything was bad about this book. There were really interesting and insightful and great topics that were addressed, but a lot of things also didn't work for me. So you might say it just wasn't my cup of tea. Okay, before I come to the third book, I'm gonna take a sip here. Feel free to drink your hot tea as well. And the third book that landed on not my cup of tea list is I Kissed Sarah Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. Am I pronouncing that wrong? Casey McQuiston. Yeah. And I rated it with 3.5 paws. I honestly didn't expect that it would get a rating like that because I love Casey McQuiston's books and so far I loved all of them. So this was kind of a surprise for me. But I think the main reason why it was a surprise, and hear me out now, is the following. I went into this book expecting to read about Chloe Green and about Sarah Wheeler, obviously, the book is named after her. And I expected a sapphic love story, but I didn't get that. What I got was that Sarah was missing 1 month before graduation and that she left a lot of hints for Chloe to find her. She kissed her unexpectedly right before she disappeared, and they've been rivals for years. And Chloe is convinced that this is just another way of Sarah to kind of keep her from studying and from being the best of the class. They had a rivalry going on, who is the best student in their class. So Chloe follows the clues and gets some help or unexpected help from Sarah's actual boyfriend and her cute neighbor, her cute introvert neighbor Rory, and her actual boyfriend. I think her boyfriend is called Smith. Yeah, Smith. So she gets help from those two and they try to find Sarah and follow her clues. So the interesting thing about this is that I absolutely didn't ship Sarah and Chloe because most of the book they are actually separate and you don't see them together on page. You only know that they hate each other, obviously. Especially Chloe seems to really dislike Sarah. And yeah, they end up, or they are the main couple in this book. And up until the ending, Casey didn't manage to persuade me that those two actually were in love. There was too much animosity and anger and resentment between those two to give them any chemistry. But what I did root for, and that is why this got such a low rating from me, is I rooted for Smith and Rory. I totally rooted for the side characters, but I didn't root for the main characters. And if you ask me, a book should always make you root for the main characters and not for the side characters. If you are rooting for the side characters, the author did something wrong. So yeah, that was the reason why this got such a low rating, because I just, if Sarah and Chloe would have really been, or should have been, the main couple, then there needed to be more scenes that would have persuaded me of their chemistry, which they didn't, and the few we got were really, I didn't feel anything. As I already said, I felt more invested in the side characters and their story. So yeah, what I really liked though about this book was that there were so many LGBTQAI plus reps in this one. I mean, we're talking about a highly religious school and, well, district they live in, and still there are a lot of queer people in there, and that I love that. I gotta admit that was one of the big pros of the book, but there also were a couple of contrasts. So yeah, I rated it 3.5 paws, and I stand by my rating. I think you should root for the main couple. Yeah, cheers to that. Let's talk about the 4th book that made it on my list. And this one was also a surprise because it was Husband Material by Alexis, and I rated it 3.5 paws as well. What to say about that book? I kind of expected Luke and Oliver to be in a steady relationship, and at the beginning of the book they actually were. They were in a relationship for 2 years already. They grew, you could see some character growth, but then a lot of things around them happen. All the friends get married and a lot of conflicts come to the surface. So the book is basically about Oliver and Luke being ready to marry each other, their way to the altar, and lots of marriages around them, or weddings at that. And if you ask me, there was a too big focus on all the other weddings. Basically the entire book is about all the other weddings and what happens there, which is fun and nice to read about, but it isn't what I wanted to read about. I actually wanted to read about Luke and Oliver, which I didn't. Because the few scenes they actually get together are always tainted by them getting into an argument and trying to make up again. And it was so frustrating to read their back and forth, and really Luke's holier than do attitude really got on my nerves in that one, and I just couldn't. All the character growth that was at the beginning of the book was ruined by the end of it, because oh my god, that ending, what the, honestly, that ending so didn't work for me. I was like, okay, that was basically my reaction to the ending. So no, that book totally didn't work for me. I mean, it was nice to read about the wedding antics and to read about the antics of Luke's and Oliver's friends, but I personally would have wanted to read about them and their relationship and how they deal with things. And the way it was just handled wasn't working for me. We didn't get any cute scenes between those two, and whenever there were some, they were ruined by them arguing again. So yeah, that one didn't work for me. I know there is a 3rd book in this series, but I'm honestly not sure if I want to pick it up. I probably will wait for the reviews about this book before I pick it up. I will be very careful with picking this book up or not. We'll see. Okay, and the last book that made it on my hot tea list was Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Malinda. And this one actually got a rating of 4 paws, which is a really good rating. There were just a couple of things that didn't work out for me. So we basically have the MC, and she is an American Chinese girl that discovers her sexuality because she's starting to crush on one of her friends in the 1950s. We have a historical element here, and I think that's one of the main reasons I didn't quite click with the book, because as you all know, I'm horrible when it comes to historical fiction, and honestly, not a lot of authors manage to pull it off and manage to make me really feel invested in the characters in those historical fiction books. I think historical fiction is just not my kind of genre. I always try to pick up books and to read them, but usually I don't end up liking them. Maybe I should quit on historical fiction altogether. I don't know. Anyway, let's get back to the book. I think what didn't work for me was the fact that the book started out really political at the beginning, and there was a really heavy focus on politics, but then it kind of turned into a coming-of-age queer love story. And personally for me, the change was kind of jarring, because I expected it to continue in that political vein, but it didn't. And it turned more into self-discovery and the first crush kind of story. So that didn't really work for me. And another thing that didn't work for me was the fact that the author did so much research and she really put a lot of effort into it. But in the book, everything we read is kept on the surface, and it's never... The author didn't dig any deeper. And at the ending of the book, we had a really nice introduction into all the things that were behind the writing and the historical events and the characters and everything. And I just wish the author would have put that research into the book so that we could have read about it in there. There were a lot of things that left me with a question mark above my head while I read the book. And then later on, when I read those historical facts and infos at the ending, I was like, if she would have just explained it a little bit more, or if she would have used that a little bit more in her book, I would have really enjoyed this. It would have made so much more sense. So yeah, that was basically the problem I had with the book. Aside of that, it was a really nice story. It was great to experience the 1950s through an American Chinese girl's eyes, a queer one at that. I think there aren't enough books about this period in history, and not from that perspective. So I know this book will mean a lot to many people, and it was really nice to see all the representation that already existed back then, but in the 1950s you had to hide it, you couldn't outlive it. You had those secret clubs like the Telegraph Club where you could meet up other girls and yeah, or other queer people. So that was great. I really liked that aspect of the book. I liked the little of the historical facts we got, but I really wish the author would have just added more of the history to it, and that the focus would have either been only on the coming of age story or on the politics. But honestly, the first, I think 20 or 30% of the book were so highly political, really highly political, and then it totally changes into another direction. So that was kind of jarring for me. But overall, it was a great book. I rated it 4 paws, so that says enough about it. I think there will always be books that have some positives and some negatives. That's the reason why I talk about them and why I write my reviews, because you always have to look at the books as a whole. And yeah. Well, I think that's it with the books that weren't my cup of tea and that just weren't for me last year, or they were for me but not entirely. As already said at the beginning of this video, I had a really good reading year, and didn't read a lot of books that didn't live up to my expectations, which is honestly great. I hope to have more years like that in the future. It seems like by now I know what I will enjoy and what I won't enjoy, so that's always a good thing. And I would really love to hear if you've read any of the books I mentioned, which kind of rating you gave them and why. And also, I would love to hear which books weren't your cup of tea last year and which books got a very low rating from you. And also, I would love to hear the reasons why. It's always interesting to hear people's arguments why they didn't like a book or why it didn't end up being a great book for them. So I would really love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, as always. And this out of the way, I think we're really at the ending of my video now, and there's nothing left to say except of take care, stay healthy and safe, and see you around the next time. Bye!